A lot. Wow, quite a turnout. I'm amazed. Thanks for choosing this session over all the others you could have chosen. I know there's another AI session happening at the same time. We're talking a little bit about AI workflows, but yeah, in general, thanks B&H for this amazing event. It's my first time at Bild. I go to all the major industry trade shows, but I mean, this is unique. I mean, I've never seen that many creators in the same place at the same time, so hungry for, education. And yeah, just a big round of applause for B&H for putting this on. Thanks. And I really think this is the right time, like the right event at the right time. This is exactly what we need, right? Something that is inspiring in a world that is a bit challenging at times right now, I think. And I think the human connection is what we need, right? Because nothing, oops, there's my clicker. Because nothing replaces human connection. Certainly not AI, but yet we are here to talk about AI in filmmaking today. It's a bit like the elephant in the room, right? I mean, we all know it's there, and it's kind of looming on the edges, kind of making its inroads into our productivity, into our creativity, no matter if you're a filmmaker or a photographer. And let's just talk about this elephant. Let's tackle it and just find out how we can actually make it work for us. Well, in case of you haven't heard of CineD, let's just have a brief introduction here. First about me, I'm a cinematographer specializing mostly in documentaries and commercials, and I've been doing that for about almost 20 years now. And alongside my partner, Johnny Bahiri, I'm also the co-CEO of CineD and MZed. Now, what is CineD? At CineD, we have a huge, CineD.com has a huge global audience of mostly professional filmmakers. And we have around 1 million visitors a month. And they check our latest reviews, gear news, videos, and articles every day. And we also do camera lab tests. That's what the site looks like. I mean, there's a QR code if you're interested. We post a lot of stuff every day. Like I already shot a couple of videos here at the trade show as well. Yeah, so basically our idea is always to put the tools that we have available to work, because we are working professionals. Everybody working for the site is actually somebody who's earning their money with shooting whatever they shoot, right? They are mostly, a lot of them are cinematographers, we have some VFX people, and they are the ones writing for the website. We don't really work with only writers. I mean, they're all coming from the industry, and that's important for us, because we need people who know how to use the gear in order to be able to have a good opinion about it. We're also quite well known for lab tests. We have a standardized lab test of cameras, always testing dynamic range, rolling shutter, and exposure latitude of cameras, not only cinema cameras, but also mirrorless cameras. And that is a scientific test that is performed the same way with every camera, and it kind of exposes how good a camera is in terms of exposure latitude, dynamic range, and rolling shutter. And there are huge differences out there. And all that information is collected in a database, so you can have rankings, you can compare the cameras with each other. And it's become something which a lot of people look for when looking for a camera. We're also running the leading filmmaking course platform, MZed, which we've acquired about 3.5 years ago. And we have hundreds and hundreds of hours of courses on pre-production, production, and post-production from some of the most prestigious filmmakers in the world, including some Oscar, Emmy, and Pulitzer Prize winners, and with new courses added regularly. A little bit more on that later on, because it's kind of connected to what I'm about to talk about, including a discount code if you're interested in signing up. Now, on CineD, we see it as our duty to report about relevant developments in our world, even if it's not the latest camera tech or anything that's related to hardware or something like that. It's also about how does our future look like in terms of filmmaking, how does it change? And one of those things is, of course, generative AI for video. But we get a lot of pushback whenever we report about anything AI related, because our audience are professional filmmakers, right? So they feel threatened, a lot of them at least, feel threatened by what's happening. So these are just some example comments that we get on some of the latest articles on Gen AI technology. And you can't blame them for that. Of course, it's scary what's happening. Just entering a prompt, being able to generate video just by, actually cinematic-looking video by entering a few words. That's scary. It's scary for a lot of people who earn their money shooting video, of course. But I tell you one thing. If you don't familiarize yourself with AI tools today, you'll be out of business in a few years from now. That sounds a bit extreme, but it's the truth. And I'll tell you why. There's a historical parallel to that. We call it the 5D revolution. Now, to go a little bit back in the history of our website, now CineD used to be called Cinema 5D up until like 5-6 years ago when we rebranded. And that name comes from the Canon EOS 5D Mark II camera that was introduced in 2008, a DSLR camera that Canon just treated like many others, right? It just was a DSLR. But what was special about it, it was the first DSLR in the market that was capable of shooting 1080p Full HD video at the beginning 30 frames per second, later on also 24 and 25. So really being able to have a proper frame rate that we need for video in Full HD. Now, why was that special? Well, it's a large sensor, it's a full frame sensor. Up until that time, we didn't have any digital camera that was capable for a reasonable amount of money to shoot Full HD video on a large sensor. Now, if I talk about that right now, like I sound like, like an old person or something, but that was really, people were using 35 millimeter adapters, crazy contraptions in front of video cameras with tiny sensors, and all of the video cameras at the time had tiny sensors. It's not that it was more expensive to get a camera that could do what the 5D Mark II could do. It just simply was impossible, because there was an Sony F35 cost $250,000, and that was a super 35 millimeter film camera. Of course, it had better image quality. Obviously, it had raw video and stuff like that. But just look at the price gap. There wasn't anything else. We had the Red 1 come in. So Red was also, I think, founded in 2007. They released the camera end of 2007, 2008 was when it started to get into people's hands. So it was around the same time, just by accident, actually, because the technology had come to a point where it was possible to release a camera that was more affordable to the masses, that was also able to have a large sensor. Now, the Red 1 came in at $17,500, a lot less money already than the F-35, which, by the way, was used on one of the, prequel Star Wars movies, I think Episode 2. And it didn't look great. These cameras, it still looked inferior to film, but the Red 1 and the 5D Mark II changed a lot of things. The 5D Mark II cost $2,699 at the beginning. And that's what happened, right? What happened immediately is that people like us, at that time, I was just, 2 years prior to that, or 1 year prior, I came out of film school. I was still learning on, beta cams, horribly huge contraptions with tiny sensors that were not capable of creating any cinematic images, really. And then we were using adapters and all kinds of things in order just to be able to get a shallow depth of field, because it was just impossible with small sensors. And they were not very light sensitive either. And suddenly this came along, and of course we jumped at the opportunity. We were trying to make it work for filmmaking purposes. The problem was, of course, at the beginning it had actually the video function of that camera, had no manual features whatsoever. Everything was automatic. Like before the firmware updates came out, you had fully, exposure was, it was all over the place. But they listened, and Canon implemented updates. And that's when we started Cinema 5D as a forum for DSLR filmmakers, because we wanted to be helping people and just sharing our own experiences with all kinds of accessories. And as many of you might know, a whole industry exploded around that, because suddenly we had more and more people and also companies taking this seriously. It was a small amount of companies actually in the beginning, but B&H, to be honest, these guys, they were on top of that from quite early on. I mean, this is, I think, when we became partners with B&H was around 2008, 2009, because they started realizing that there is a new generation of filmmakers that, you know, doesn't have a lot of money to spend, but is trying to get into this. And suddenly we saw commercials shot on the 5D Mark II. We saw documentaries, and people were starting to take it seriously. Now, of course, so take a wild guess where that left all those naysayers that actually said, you know, you don't want to, we will never shoot with a photo camera on a big set. You know, there were a lot of people like that. They're out of business now. I mean, those are literally people who now struggle to find work. Like, if you never made that change, if you were still stubborn enough to, you know, keep at the old ways, you were in trouble, because the entire industry changed over the next 10 years. As we know, all the technology has become, like, especially cameras, has become so much more affordable. Following cameras, the lenses and the lights became more affordable. Everything was following that trend because we had, I mean, you just look to the person sitting next to you. You know, like, there's a 9 out of 10 people probably wouldn't be in this room if it wasn't for this revolution that really paved the way also for mirrorless cameras to be available at a very affordable price. So and now it's mainstream, right? We have big productions using small cameras. Now we even have the largest high-end cameras shrinking in size, because they also realize you're more flexible with smaller cameras. You have cameras like the Red V-Raptor, the Komodo, even the Alexa 35. They are much, much smaller than they used to be, because also high-end filmmakers now realize the potential. And also, don't forget, a lot of the people starting out in the DSLR revolution, one of them actually being Oren Sofer, who, you know, the VP of The Creator, he was here on stage yesterday having an amazing talk with Shane Hulbert. He was one of them. You know, these guys are now the ones who are, like, in the industry, and they kind of demand small cameras that can be taken seriously in terms of what they can do. So, yeah, that leaves us where we are now. So things are in question again. Things are changing. A lot of unanswered questions in our industry, I think. And the question is, of course, that's looming among many of us: is AI going to replace creativity? Now, let me get that straight. I absolutely think that Gen AI is absolutely based on theft in many, many ways. You know, those big companies, they have trained their models on copyrighted work. They never asked us for our permission when they, you know, probably trained on everything that's on YouTube, every written word on the internet. But the train has probably left the station, right? And it will be almost impossible to stop now. However, some are trying. There are copyright fights out there. The New York Times and also the music industry have sued those companies. For example, the Times has sued OpenAI over the use of their copyrighted work, which is behind a paywall. And they found out that, you know, you can enter prompts and you can almost verbatim recreate some of the New York Times articles if you write the right prompt. That can't be a coincidence. Same with the music industry. There's services like Udio, for example, which you can use to, you know, you can make a Mariah Carey sounding song just by entering the prompt, make me a song that sounds like Mariah Carey, and then it sounds a little bit like it or quite a bit like it. But it kind of circumvents the whole copyright system, of course. What's with Hollywood? Hollywood is kind of cozying up to AI at the same time, and that's what's really upsetting us filmmakers. Up until recently, there wasn't a single lawsuit of any Hollywood major studio against any of those AI companies, and we didn't understand why. And the reason probably behind that is that they actually see more potential in kind of using the technology for their own gain, right? Just kind of slashing cost by having stuff automatically generated. For animation, it's already happening, but it's also, you know, like Disney was trying to get permission from actors to recreate their likeness after they are deceased and stuff like that. Scary stuff. But up until, actually I had the presentation changed today or yesterday, because of this. We reported about it a couple days ago. Finally, Disney and NBC Universal sued Midjourney. It took them 4.5 years for some reason. I was using Midjourney 4 years ago and wondered, why is nobody stopping them? You can literally, this is a screenshot from the lawsuit. This is what Midjourney outputs when you just write, make me an image of Yoda, you know, like in a cave or whatever. And this is the original stills from the movie. And there's a lot of examples in there from different, like Aladdin, there's Monsters Incorporated, there's a lot of things, also real life action stuff. And it looks exactly like the original. And they're not preventing that, right? You can just enter that. And if they are, sometimes these companies are smart or trying to be smart. I'm sure a lot of people have tried, you know, ChatGPT, similar way. It will sometimes tell you, I cannot create this because of copyright reasons. And then you, instead of writing whatever, you know, I want an image that looks like Monsters Incorporated, you write, I want monsters in a, you know, friendly monsters or something like that, and it will spit out exactly the same image, kind of. Because those system prompts, they can only limit a very, very small fraction of what the model is capable of. It's actually not easy for the creators of these models to prevent them from doing a lot of the things they're doing. And they have to create those system prompts that are kind of forbidding the model to do specific things. And that can never be, I mean, you can never, ever kind of cover everything, right? So that's never going to work. So it's going to be interesting what's going to happen from this lawsuit, because if Disney and NBC Universal win this, it's going to create a precedent that will have to be applied by OpenAI, Google, and all the other companies doing this at the same time. And it reminds me a little bit of Napster. Remember Napster in 2000, which was like, you know, suddenly everybody, also a technological shift that allowed music to be distributed on the internet because it just became small because the MP3 format was created, and then somebody made a platform to illegally share all this music peer-to-peer, so it was a little bit hard to switch off because actually people were sharing it with each other through that platform. And yeah, but a similar way, they managed to kind of stop that and create a business model around that, and that's why we have Spotify and Apple Music and all those now. But yeah, let's see what happens. I mean, I don't think it can continue like that. But to make a long story short, I have a negative and positive scenario. The negative scenario here is, I think there's a couple of video productions that are most threatened by generative AI. I mean, this list is not exhaustive, but this is some of the things that I could think of. I think commercials, stock footage, animation, and mass-produced fiction will suffer the most in the short term from this. Why? Well, stock footage is obvious, right? You don't need to purchase stock footage clips anymore if you can just enter exactly what you need for your gap-filling shot. You need a couple of people sitting around a conference table. Now you can define their age, you can define everything about them, what the room looks like, what are they talking about, all that kind of stuff is very easy to generate now. So I think stock footage is done. That's the reality. I mean, any of you who are into stock photos and footage will have noticed a significant drop in sales over the last couple of years. There's several reasons to that. One of them is actually that most of those companies have switched to subscription models, which leaves less money for the individual purchase, kind of, because it's just like a small fraction of whatever they pay per month, as opposed to individual, you know, money spent on each asset. Commercials, same thing, right? You don't have to rely on famous actors for a lot of commercials. It's only a couple of shots, which is much easier to create than an entire movie with consistent characters. I think a lot of commercials, we're gonna see a lot of commercials in the very near future that are entirely generative AI created. And the truth is, I think a lot of people are already using and experimenting with it, but not talking about it. And that's true for all kinds of AI stuff, right? I think it's being used more and more and more, and it only surfaces when somebody's open about it or somebody realizes that it is AI created, but it's getting harder and harder to identify. Animation, same thing, very easy. We all saw the the trend on Instagram when OpenAI released the latest version of their image generator a couple weeks ago, actually, or like a couple months ago. Everybody was doing those Japanese-style animation images, right, of Studio Ghibli, and that's complete copyright theft. The reason why they didn't prevent that specific prompt was because in Japan, I don't know if any of you knew, there is no law against doing that, apparently. So they consciously kind of put that in, right? If you put, I want something, for some time it didn't work when you wrote, I want a character that looks like The Simpsons, it would tell you, I can't do that because of copyright. Now it works again. Because there has been some legislation in the US around that which kind of allowed it, but it's still a bit of a gray area. So let's hope that this lawsuit actually changes some of that. And also mass-produced fiction. You know, if you think of the typical telenovela, you know, that kind of stuff that isn't relying on any famous faces or anything, or complex backgrounds and stuff like that, as long as you can create character consistency, I think that stuff is going to be mass-produced. I think it's only a matter of time until we see one of the major streamers actually advertise that they made an entire series with generative AI video, whether we like it or not. Now, positive scenario, there's a couple of areas of filmmaking and videography that are not going to be affected, or not as much. News, of course, there's the possibility of fake news. We already see it every day now. But the actual news, of course, you cannot generate. Documentaries, you cannot generate an interview with a real person. But what you can do, which actually is helping, and I know that as a documentary filmmaker, I often work on historical documentaries, and you constantly struggle with the fact that there is no budget or very little budget for reenactments or historical reenactments, that kind of stuff. You never have the kind of money that you need to kind of, you know, like you shoot a documentary about ancient Rome, you're not gonna, you know, build the Colosseum or whatever and have 1,000 extras. This is where generative AI can come in, of course. And, but for the main documentary, you can't actually generate it. Reality TV, obviously, cannot do that unless it's fake reality, of course. And wedding films, I mean, why would you automatically generate a wedding film? But unless, you know, the wedding didn't go as planned, I don't know. But yeah, but I mean, these industry or these segments of our industry are not going to be as affected, but they are still going to be affected because I think with everybody else who's kind of forced out of the industries that I mentioned before, that's going to create some more pressure on these industries. I think a lot more people will go into documentaries over the next couple of years because of that reason. But artificial intelligence is a lot more than just Gen AI. So I wouldn't want to be distracted by it. I would suggest beat them at their own game. Use what's available with AI in order to enhance your creativity, because their AI is not just Gen AI. There are machine learning-based technologies that you can apply to your filmmaking already, which will help you be more efficient and actually give you more time to be more effective at the uncreative tasks that you don't really want to do, right? We all know that we like to be creative, but we all know that there's a lot of stuff that is kind of involved with this creativity, which is not creative, right? And just in order to get something done. And if you think really hard about it, you can do so much now to speed up that process, particularly in pre-production and post-production. In production as well, I'm not going to focus on production a lot today, because this is very much kind of involved with, you know, like you usually have to work with a lot of other people in production. So it's going to be harder to implement there, but it's much easier to implement these tools in pre-production and post-production. So Eric Schmidt, the former Google CEO, said in a recent TED Talk that he thinks the AI revolution is underhyped. Now, if you think about the amount of news we get around AI, you might agree, because it is a lot. But once you in my opinion, once you dive into this technology and just see the massive scope of it, and it's not just one technology, but it's kind of a buzzword, of course. But if you really dive into what's possible now, I think I have to agree. I think the filmmaking industry and also videography industry, whatever you call it, is still very conservative when it comes to applying those tools, because especially the filmmaking industry is, of course, kind of an old industry now, and the way things work they kind of tend to move very slowly. We are just under the false impression that they move fast because the camera technology is advancing fast, but the processes in the background are actually quite slowly changing. And there's a lot of opportunity here. We already can see that AI is changing entertainment. So, I mean, here's some numbers. You saw the market grow in specifically AI for entertainment by 15.7 billion already. There's a 73% adoption rate of creators using AI tools. Now that's based on a study, and it's a very, very broad assumption, of course. But like probably that also means if you just use ChatGPT for something, and the time savings are significant that we can see specifically. That was about post-production, and I'm going to talk about that as well. Now, of course, every revolution faces a resistance. I already talked about the DSLR mirrorless revolution. People called it a photo camera, too small, weak codecs, and so on. And all of that changed. I mean, there was resistance in the beginning, but at the end, it turned out it's more flexible, more spontaneous, and it kind of created the entire creator economy alongside the smartphone, of course. If you go a bit further back in time, you saw the move from the Steenbeck, the manual editing of film, like actually splicing and gluing film together, to NLEs. There was a huge resistance against that. That was already in the 80s and 90s when everybody was still working with proxies once they moved to NLEs, because it wasn't possible to do like a full telecine, like full resolution edit. But still, I mean, there were the same things. I looked up some news reports from the time from industry publications, and a lot of editors at the time were saying, computers can't edit, it's too complicated. Well, guess what? The editors who didn't adjust are out of business. Same with film to digital. I mean, we all know that most movies were still shot on film up until 15 years ago, 10 years ago even. Now it's really, Christopher Nolan and Quentin Tarantino that are still shooting film. Everybody else will have a hard time arguing in front of their production why they need the budget to shoot film, because you can mimic the effect. It's never going to be the same, of course, but with the quality of cameras now, in terms of dynamic range, like digital cameras have already long surpassed film stock. It's not organic, but we're all trying to make it look organic. And of course, this alone has democratized filmmaking. You can go even further back. If you think about sound film, silent movies, there was such a big resistance in Hollywood against soundies. And that's what they called them at the time. Suddenly people were talking on film, and all the actors who from the silent film area didn't have jobs anymore because they couldn't talk in front of the camera. So that changed. So I'm just bringing this up as examples because each one of those technological revolutions faced a lot of resistance. And there is always the same pattern. It starts with fear. I don't know what this is. It threatens my job, so I'm really against it. That's not a good reason to be against something, but that's what happens, and it's understandable. Then the adoption happens. Okay, I'm finding out I can use it to make stuff work better, like to be more efficient, to do things in a different way, and it actually helps my job. And then only after that, the innovation happens. And that is when I find out that I can do things that I wasn't able to do ever before. And I think we are not there yet in terms of AI. Once the innovation stage is over, new voices emerge, access grows, and efficiency really multiplies. And the stories, like the filmmaking Storytelling will not stop. I can already see a whole new generation of quote-unquote filmmakers. I don't know if you will call them that, but probably people who have never touched a camera. Whether we like it or not, I don't like it, but that's the truth. There will be people making amazing storytelling just by prompting their video out. You know, it's a bit scary, but it's going to happen. We already see the first examples of that. I think in general, I think most of us are still in between these two, right? Fear and slowly adopting. Maybe some are firmly in the adoption phase already. I think hardly anyone is in the innovation phase. I'm just going to give you a couple of example use cases for this productive use of AI that I've mentioned. And as I said in the beginning, I'm going to focus particularly on pre-production and post-production. And this is not, again, there's going to be a million other use cases. It's just some use cases that I find very easily applicable to everybody's work. So let's look at pre-production and three particular things in pre-production: script analysis, mood boards, and shot planning. Those are very, very time-consuming tasks, right? Anybody who has ever had to analyze a script and kind of come up with a shot list or create a mood board or plan the shots, shot by shot, for a film, whether it's a commercial, a music video, or even a feature film, knows how time-consuming that is. And if you look at script analysis, that's an easy one. I mean, you can use any of the large language models, LLMs, ChatGPT, Claude, or Shotcraft, which is specialized on that, by inputting the script and by adding some, the right prompts, get a detailed shot list of what the film could look like. And it's never going to be exactly what you would have interpreted the script with, but it's a good starting point. I've tried it with a couple of things that I shot in the past. I just loaded the script inside, and I just tried to find out what it's spitting out. I suggest you do the same. Just upload the PDF, tell it to analyze it, and come up with a shot list. You can give it some guidance. You can say, well, I want it a little bit in this style or that style, or and it will absolutely save a lot of time. And then you will sit and edit it and just change things, or add some other prompts to have it changed. Visual development. Now, using Midjourney, the ones that just been sued, Dolly or Firefly, for example, you can very easily now create lighting concepts, color palettes, even the set design or costume references. Now, my first choice for this kind of stuff is usually ShotDeck, which is not an AI tool. It's by Larry Sher, ASC, and it's an amazing collection of stills from all kinds of, like, thousands of movies, and they just selected some of the most significant stills from each movie. And if you're a subscriber, you can kind of make your own mood board based on actual movies. That's the best way to go. But sometimes, you want something more specific, and then these tools are really, really useful. You can also upload reference images and tell it to modify it into something else. Now, I would never use that as my creative output because I want to shoot, I'm a cinematographer, but I will use it as an inspiration as where things can go. And that's really, really useful for that. It also is very efficient because you can generate like 20 reference images in 10 minutes if you need to. And specifically, I mean, when I'm shooting commercials, I've moved into this kind of workflow now. Storyboarding and pre-visualization, same thing. I mean, hardly any production that is kind of like I would say, small budget or medium budget production has the actual budget to hire a storyboard artist. So what I used to do is just to take photos, kind of reenact stuff without lighting, just to kind of get a feeling for the blocking and the angles and the shot sizes and stuff like that. This is now much easier. You can kind of, based on the actual location, you can upload photos, you can insert some of the like characters and have character consistency if you know how to deal with it. And it's also going to be much faster and cheaper, and that's actually the best thing about it. It allows you instant iterations, right? I mean, the few times that I have been lucky enough to work with a storyboarding artist, it's usually like the budget for the storyboard is kind of used up. Once the storyboard is done, then you need changes, and then you don't have the storyboard anymore because you can't pay for those changes. So you kind of improvise, and now you can just have iterations of that. There is that's just an example of one of those tools that generates you a storyboard based on the script that you put in. So yeah, the best shot, I think, is the one you can plan, and AI really lets you iterate that until it's really, really perfect. Now, sticking with storyboarding and pre-visualization, of course, I mean, you can, when you move into pre-vis, you can use that storyboard and animate it if you need to. There's other tools like Google Flow, this VO3 and Runway ML that can animate still images, whether they are real or based on AI-generated images, and that will allow you to do a previs of something, right? Sometimes, especially to test timing, I've started to use that. So the thing is, most of those systems are still kind of limited in the amount of, like the length that they can generate in terms of video clips, sometimes like 10 seconds, which is quite short, but that will change. And, but it will help you to get the timing right before you're actually on set. It will save you money on set because you will know exactly what you need. You don't, if you want to experiment, I always say, the best way to experiment is to have a plan, right? If you have a plan, it allows you to have the time on set to experiment. If you don't have a plan, all you do is experimentation. And it's usually not a good way of kind of coming up with fresh ideas because you're just constantly struggling to keep up with your schedule. If you have a really good plan, if you have previs and at least a storyboard, especially for commercials, it's so essential because there's so much pressure usually to get a lot of shots in a very short amount of time. If you know exactly what you want, there is room to change your plan once you're there because you know how long it would take. But yeah, using these tools, you can have a lot of different approaches in a very short amount of time. You can share the visual concepts with the client instantly and also change them, and people appreciate that. That's another thing, like if you apply this now, your clients will appreciate it because they've probably not seen this from anybody else yet, right? In terms of like how fast you can react and iterate things. Of course, I'm always fully open about what they see is AI generated. You have to be. But this is not the final product. This is the previs, right? We're not talking about the final product. The final product is something I want to shoot. I don't want to generate it. You can spot potential problems before shooting, of course, and what's also essential, the entire crew will kind of see your vision before you actually start shooting, which is very helpful. Location intelligence, that's another thing that's extremely intriguing. Now, there's a couple of new tools that they are using photogrammetry and technology called Gaussian splatting to track what your location looks like. So basically, this was created using a phone and an app and just walking through the location. So I could just start the app up here and just walk around and then have a perfect 3D model of the location. Why do I need that? Well, look at this. I mean, this is all created with a phone. That somebody was like, it's not perfect. You wouldn't use that as your film, right? But it gives you an exact feeling for the location. It gives you, actually, you can do exact measurements. You can go back home once you've done your location scouting like that. Instead of taking photos from every angle and then probably not remembering anymore which direction you went or whatever the focal length was, this allows you to do very precise measurements. You can know exactly if that kind of furniture that you're planning to bring in or whatever prop you need will fit there or not. You can even really plan your angles. I mean, you can know exactly where your camera angle is going to be by zooming in and zooming out of this. It's quite amazing, and it's very, very easy to do if you have good lighting. You need good lighting. Yeah, those are some of the tools that you can use for that. It's Polycam, Luma AI, and the technology is called 3D Gaussian splatting. And that can be done with iPhones, iPads, and so on. Yeah, time saving is, of course, I mean, this saves a lot of time. I mean, who of you has ever done a location scout? Okay, well, that's most of you. Have you ever had the experience, if there was a lot of time between your location scout and the actual shoot, that you kind of remember it differently from what it was like? I've had that a couple of times. I think this will help with that. And also it will help, of course, I mean, always good tip, use an app that tells you where the sun is at which time of day, because of course that's very useful. That will not be replaced by Gaussian splatting, but you will know where to position your camera at the right time. Yeah, remote collaboration is of course much easier, and of course risk reduction. That's specifically for commercials. I think commercials are under a lot of pressure when it comes to budgets, because honestly, commercials in Hollywood, have been very wasteful in the past, like big productions in terms of like money spent. And I think the availability of all those tools is going to force those productions to be more effective. And if you're the one helping the production to implement those, and that, not with the intention to kind of cut jobs, but just to be in the purpose of the production to kind of have the best possible outcome in the most effective way, that's really useful, I think. Let's talk about post-production briefly, and specifically 3 aspects. I want to talk about transcription and text-based editing, AI-powered masking, and also enhancement and restoration. Now, transcription and subtitles, now that is a kind of easy one, but that was one of the most time-consuming things ever. I mean, my first documentary that I ever shot, which was my master's thesis film, whatever, 1-hour documentary, I had 30 hours of interviews, and I spent an entire summer transcribing every single word of that before I started to edit. I could do this in 1 day now, because automatic transcription is not perfect. It will get stuff wrong, but it helps you so much in terms of doing this paper cut, like the text-based editing. But even if you just need a transcription or subtitles, captions, and translate them, this will help tremendously. The workflow that I recommend, I mean, this is text-based editing. For example, this is what like what you usually do for documentaries. I mean, you have those big chunks of interview. You have like a 1-hour interview from like 5 different people, and you cut it together into one documentary. And it's always very hard to find, like if you shot it, you like might remember, oh, this person talked about that, and they might have talked about it at that point in time. And then you spend like 10 minutes finding that one sentence. It's horrible. Now you have the automatic transcription built into most NLEs. It's in Premiere Pro, it's in DaVinci Resolve, and it's also now in Final Cut Pro. And it will allow you to, even if the transcription is not perfect, because sometimes, of course, it gets words or names wrong, it will be 90% fine. As long as you can remember that one word that they talked about, you can just search for it, and it will jump right to that right position in your video. And then you can take it to the next step and do text-based editing. So basically, splice your edit from text. You cut and paste segments from a text together, and then we'll have an actual edit in your timeline. That's amazing. And that, especially for assembly edits of documentaries, I always hated, I really hate editing my own stuff, It's horrible. I'm so much more comfortable behind the camera. But the main reason why I don't like it is the assembly edit. I know exactly what I want once the assembly edit is down on the timeline, but I don't want to do the first, I procrastinate like crazy, because I always find something better to do. But this really helps me getting over this, right? Because this is the most time-consuming task for documentary shoots. And also, if you are translating this into different languages, what I recommend, just copy that transcript, paste it into ChatGPT, tell it to correct it, and tell it to, let's say you do an interview with a doctor about whatever, heart transplants, and you tell it that this is a text about heart transplants by this doctor, whatever, it will do such a much better job actually at correcting it when it knows already what it is. It will get names right, because it will in the background actually check the names in its data set or whatever. And I do this sometimes with all kinds of like interviews we do at trade shows as well about new products, and I just tell it, well, this is about this, and it's very complicated stuff. I mean, there's, technical names of cameras and stuff, and it usually gets all the writing correct once you do that. And from that point, you can easily translate it into different languages. Now, I would always recommend have it checked by a native speaker afterwards, because the translations are never 100% perfect, but they are 95% there usually. That's how we have started to put captions in every language on our MZed courses, because that works, and we just have it proofread by our native speaker. Yeah, you can also search the entire project for words and stuff like that, and it just makes your rough cuts a lot faster. And the tools that allow that are really all the major NLEs now have built it in. Just in general, all of the things I talk about, you really need the latest version. You need Final Cut 11, you need DaVinci 20, you also need the latest Premiere and Avid as well. Like all of those NLE platforms have just kind of introduced these kind of things in the latest versions. And then combined with those LLMs, it works. Yeah, assembly edits in general, I just want to mention this. I mean, I was specifically talking about transcription now, but this is in general. I mean, there's a lot of other things. I did an experiment, or we did an experiment on something which not using any AI tools for this specific task took us 15 hours with traditional editing, and using AI-powered editing, we came to 2.25 hours. And this included a lot of metadata stuff, like if you're NLE, or if you has the ability to recognize what's actually happening in a video and automatically generate the metadata for that. That's extremely useful for B-roll shots. You know how much time you spend looking for B-roll, right? You usually just see the first frame in your media bin. Nobody takes the time to organize this stuff into bins. Or does anybody do that? I never do that. Oh, you do that. 2 people, 3 people. That's the pro editors here. I never do that. I'm lazy. And now I have metadata automatically generated, so that's amazing. Text-based selection, AI-assisted rough cut, and then also smart color grading that uses AI tools. So that can really speed things up. The next thing I want to talk about is AI-powered masking. Now, this is something, I did a review of Apple's what is it called, magnetic mask in Final Cut 11, and it works amazingly well. I just used some footage that I had from a review about a new DJI drone, and it's literally one click. It's perfect. Even if the thing leaves the frame and comes back in, it will recognize it again. You can fix it, you can do, I mean, there's still, you still probably need rotoscoping for some specific stuff. But now I can do this stuff. I mean, the resolution is quite bad on this, but you can do selective color grading. I can select a subject or object and just make the background black and white. Like in this case, like this house, this was a drone shot that I took. And then you see how it works in terms of like kind of correcting the mask and stuff like that. And once you're done, you just click Analyze, and it just does that in kind of real time, because the Apple M1, M2, M3, M4 processors are super fast. And it just rips through 4K footage like that, and you immediately can apply color grading. You can make the background black and white. You can make something stand out more that is a little bit dark without actually having to work with animated masks or even rotoscoping or stuff like that. And honestly, I have to say, this is the best way I've tried so far. Now, DaVinci Resolve has something similar that's called, now it's black and white. That's called Magic Mask. That was enhanced a little bit with DaVinci 20. It was introduced first with DaVinci 19, but the one in Final Cut Pro works better still. I compared them. So yeah, if you want to try that, even if you don't use Final Cut for editing anything else, you should use that feature. Good, yeah, that's Magic Mask and Magnetic Mask. And then, of course, there's also ways of enhancement and restoration, AI upscaling, denoising, archival footage restoration, and there's really the best tools out there are from a company called Topaz that many of you might know. They're very big on, there's so many ads everywhere, but they are good. I mean, it is very good to upscale stuff in general. So basically, what I can just say about this is, oh, something wrong with the text here, but AI is powerful, but it's still just a tool, and the tools that I showed you are really allowing you to retain your creativity and kind of enhance it, right? You just want to be more efficient. You don't want to give the creativity to the computer. So you still stay in control with these tools. Now, I just want to mention here at the end that for many of the things that I've just talked about, we are working on little courses. We are starting a new course series on MZed called The Efficient Filmmaker. And it's new workflow tools that are going to be portrayed in relatively short courses that we will keep updating. So the whole idea is if you're a subscriber, you can check back every other month or so, and we will update the whole course, just add lessons at the end or whatever with the new tools that were added. I find it very, very hard to keep track of a lot of things, and this is why we are specifically looking at some of those aspects. The first 3 courses that we're launching, the first one is the Subtitles Mastery course that just launched yesterday. That's available now. The next one that's going to come, that's talking about all the subtitle caption stuff that I just mentioned in all the major NLEs and also translations and text-based editing. The next one is going to be quick video masking, and it's going to deal with DaVinci Resolve and Final Cut. And that's in post-production now. And the next one we are going to shoot next week is dealing with, it's called Vision Lab, and it's about this 3D visualization. It's a bit more complex, but still quite easy to apply, actually, using those Gaussian splatting methodology that I mentioned. So those are going to be the first 3. We're going to add more courses to that series as we go, and also based on feedback, of course. That's the first course that's available now, taught by Masha Dekova, who's really diving into these tools. Yeah, if you are interested, there's an exclusive discount for the first month of MZed subscribers. Just use the code BILD25. This is only valid until June 30th, if you're interested, and you get a 20% discount for the monthly subscription. But in total, I mean, we have like 63 courses available with hundreds and hundreds of hours from a lot of creators. So I think you will find a lot of time to spend there and get taught cool stuff.